There's a lot of energy in an environment like this, isn't there? There's a crowd mentality that reminds us that we are involved in a singular social organism and that we relate to each other on a very, very profound and deep level. And as profound as that is on one side, it can also be a little caustic and dangerous on another. If we get too caught up in things that, might move us in the wrong direction. But I don't see that happening here. As you all know, my name is Peter Joseph. I work with an organization called the Zeitgeist Movement. Thank you. And it's a sustainability advocacy group without country, without class, of course, without any religion or race. It is a global concept working to unify the human species, considered humane and actually sustainable. In the longer term interest, we actually seek something that I think many of you might share, which is the removal of the entire socioeconomic system itself. So many people yell at political buildings and they work to try and engage their political establishment in the idea that that actually is where the power resides in this world that we share, when it's very clear that the power is obviously within the financial structure and always has been. That what we're seeing in the world today is actually the rise of the social immune system. Not the rise of political ideology, but the rise of a defense mechanism coming from the very fabric of our culture that sees that something is extremely wrong and very, cancerous. Cancerous to society as a whole.
And that was Peter Joseph, who was speaking at the Los Angeles Occupy rally in October 2011. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ZM Global Radio Show. My name is Jason Lord. I'm the California coordinator for the Zeitgeist Movement. I wanted to start off today by taking a look at the movement itself and how we've become productive as chapters across the world. And to that end, I have a few guests today. I have several chapter coordinators from local and regional chapters from around California also joining me today for the show. I have Eva Omori and Brandon Christie of the Los Angeles chapter. I have Don Ickes of the San Diego chapter and Aria Rashid of Sacramento. We're starting with, there were about 18 subchapters in California all total, and out of those, about 15 are active. We're just going to start with a few people today, just because having all 18 people on one show is just not feasible. The focus on this show is going to be what's going on with the chapters, what the chapters are, how we're functioning, what our network is like, and some of the things that we're actually doing to engage the public. Just to start things off with a few definitions, the Zeitgeist Movement chapter structure is our communications network to organize worldwide. Each new chapter gives people in that region a place to go to engage in these solutions the movement proposes. At the moment, the movement's focus is on awareness activism, of not only having a presence in the world, but on the root causes to persistent social problems and towards a sustainable solution, which we can briefly name a resource-based economic model. For everyone listening, that's probably familiar to you by now. And for anyone new, can jump onto the zeitgeistmovement.com and find several lectures that would lay out how that structure works. The chapters themselves are focused on on-the-ground awareness projects and social interaction in regard to forwarding this direction and getting it out into the public. Our greatest challenge isn't the technical applications of any of the solutions that we may talk about in the movement. The challenge is addressing the value systems that are in place, which are perpetuated by established institutions, and they comprise the largest part of our society, namely the monetary establishments, political establishments, and religious establishments. The value systems that are created by these established orders are the most difficult for us to address. And someone I admire once told me that the truth isn't something that is told to you. It is something that you realize through new information. So that being the case, the purpose of the chapters, the way we're set up is a holographic network that creates an on-the-ground and in-person presence to take on the task of engaging the public and inputting new information into the current value systems. And we're doing this as best we can through the volunteers that show up to take the time. So at this point, I'd like to introduce my guests today. To start off, I have Eva Omori and Brandon Christie of the Los Angeles chapter.
Hello, and yes, my name's Eva Omori, and Brandon and I have been coordinating the Los Angeles chapter for a couple years here.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's Brandon from the Los Angeles chapter. Yeah, help coordinate the LA chapter with Eva.
Hello there, my name is Don Ickes. I coordinate the San Diego chapter here representing San Diego, California.
And hi, everybody. My name's Arya Rashid, and I help coordinate the Sacramento chapter of California.
There's many chapters here in the state. Ultimately, the chapters are working together as a big communications organization, and we all stay in touch with each other. We meet occasionally to go over, coordinate our larger events, especially town halls, or an example would be earlier this year with the screening of Zeitgeist Moving Forward, which was a worldwide coordinated effort. To start some things off here, I was going to go over a few language distinctions. One of the things that have come up a lot with the chapters, there's a lot, sometimes we'll come up against criticisms that we're some sort of a power structure, or people aren't too sure what we're doing. They might view awareness activism as not doing anything. And I just wanted to shed some light on the fact that one of the things that are most apparent to me is that what we're doing is absolutely necessary as far as data flow, as far as information flow, and interacting with people and getting this information out there enough where people can find it and understand what the problems are and what the solutions are. So when the biosocial pressures occur, we're creating a cushion for people to have some basic understanding of how the world works, how we could do things, and the directions we could move in, rather than trying to reform traditional institutions or create more laws and legislation to fight problems that we're having with, say, pollution or crime and things like that. Just to start off with the first language distinction, was I wanted to basically talk about what a coordinator is. And again, we have Arya, Brandon, Don, and Eva here along with myself, and we're all chapter coordinators for the movement. As far as titles go, the title itself is kind of meaningless. What really is important is what it means, as in what we're doing. The term coordinator is a descriptive term of what the actions are. And ultimately, all this really means is that we're a group of volunteers, and we're taking our time and we're putting in efforts that are purposed really for trying to get enough information out there so people want to transition out of a monetary market paradigm to a sustainable resource-based model. So when we're out there and we're facilitating, really, we're doing awareness activism, we put on events, we basically are almost like project managers in a way, because we're assessing skills, we're creating a calendar where people can come and check out what's going on and volunteer and help out if they wish, and staying in communication with everyone. So I just wanted to throw this out to everyone here on the show. What got you to volunteer for such a position in the first place? So Arya, how about you?
Sure, thanks, Jason. So I was following Zeitgeist for probably a period of about a year before I finally decided to get heavily involved, and that it's something that I want to volunteer for. And there was a chapter here in Sacramento, which I went to one or two meetings for, but it was kind of just developing and wasn't really set up that well yet. And that chapter kind of dissolved after a little while, and months later I saw a post on zmca.org that they were looking for another chapter coordinator for Sacramento. And although I had no idea what that meant or what to do, I definitely wanted a chapter to be in Sacramento, a functional chapter. So I figured I'd volunteer, and now I'm here.
Don, what got you to volunteer to be a coordinator for the movement?
Well, to start off with, I have been looking for quite some time for some type of movement or organization that represents what the Zeitgeist Movement actually does represent. I came to a realization a long time ago that something was stinking in Denmark and needed to be done, and happened to be poking around on the internet one day, and I found, just by happenstance, the Zeitgeist Movement came up in a global Google search, and my first reaction was, holy crap, there's people out there that think like me. Moving beyond that, I started to look for other like-minded thinkers in the San Diego area. I eventually found the California State site. Thank you, Jason, for setting that up, by the way. And just kind of paid attention to the forums, seeing if there was anybody else out there, doing searches for people from San Diego, and happened to run across a couple other members, and realized there was kind of a fledgling chapter trying to get off the ground here in San Diego. Went to a couple of their meetings. Turns out that when I jumped in with them, they were trying to organize a screening of Addendum at a bar. And things were going well. I mean, we were having meetings every week, but after we were able to get this screening off the ground, we had our screening in December of, 2009 now? And then we just kind of dispersed for the holidays. People had family obligations going on, and we just decided that we would reconvene in the following January of the following year of 2010. Well, Christmas comes and goes, and January comes by and I'm not hearing anything from anybody. And that was really the kind of the end of the first incarnation of the San Diego chapter. I started throwing out messages out there again on the state site, seeing if there were anybody else that was, interested in meeting up with me. A couple of the other original members actually hung around, and we, tried getting some things off the ground, showing some interest. And finally, I decided that I was going to have to probably wait until an event came around to maybe find other members in the area. And finally, Z-Day approached, and I really wanted to do something about that. I decided that I was just going to do a bannering event. If it was just me that was going to go hold up a banner in front of a freeway, then so be it, I was going to. But fortunately, other people posted on the Z-Day calendar that they had events going on as well. We had a screening, and another member had a lecture that day. So I just attended their events, and we all got together and started talking, and lo and behold, San Diego chapter of the Zeitgeist Movement version 2.0 forms. And ever since then, things have just been kind of just growing almost on a daily basis now.
Thanks, Don. It's great. Eva, how about you? What got you to volunteer for this?
It's really been good to hear both Arya and Don's experience as far as becoming coordinators. It seems that since we're starting out, and it's been a couple years, that what I hear is that we all saw a need that needed to be fulfilled in regards to the movement and its activities. And it was no different for myself as well. There was a desire to participate in something that I saw great value in. Something volunteering for was something I would actually look forward to doing and could see the merit in. But similarly, there was the initial, well, who's doing what and how things form. We went through the same version of it was a random assortment of people. And what I'm hearing is that the skill sets aren't there, or some level of understanding, or if there's not a group that somehow there's enough strength within that location that enough people start to step up so you can link up with each other and start having an effective communication, which is really what it is, to establish a group that will cause a chapter to wane and then, of course, recoalesce or form. And it was the same thing. It was no different here. If I could have stepped in some other capacity, I'm sure I would have, but it was a need that needed to be met, and here we are. So that's pretty much the gist of it, which is really kind of, to me, it's exciting to hear that people are committed to that level, and that's what our coordinators are made of.
Thanks, Eva. That's excellent. And Brandon, what got you to be interested in being a coordinator for a chapter of the movement?
Well, let's see. Me and Eva, we knew each other pretty well a couple years ago, and we started, researching the Zeitgeist Movement, and we had watched the movies, and we looked it up on the internet, and there was a Los Angeles group on meetup.com, and we went to this, I guess it was like the first meeting, and there's a few people there, and I just, ever since I've gotten into the Zeitgeist Movement, I wanted to do my part to make it as big as possible, and whatever I could do, I couldn't wait to be a part of it. I really do believe that, and I continue to believe that there's something very major in the implications of what we're doing in the Zeitgeist Movement. Our work with communication and awareness is very major with respect to social change and making a substantial difference in the world, a measurable difference. There was a need for awareness actions and coordinating, meetings and doing things in the Los Angeles area. There was no, at the time, there was not much of that going on, and I, attended the state meetings on TeamSpeak 3 where we kind of touched base with what we're doing, and the need was there, so I just started doing it, and like Eva said, I would have probably plugged in anywhere I could, and I guess that's by my actions became a coordinator.
Excellent, thanks. So just to sum things up here.
What about you, Jason? What about you?
Hopefully what I was going to sum up explains what got me interested in myself, which was ultimately, if people are familiar with the cliche, or actually maybe it's not a cliche, but necessity is the mother of invention. And basically, I saw a need for a place to people to come to engage in these ideas. A couple of years ago, there was no chapter structure. There weren't groups. There was not a Zeitgeist Movement. There was nothing. And after the first film had hit the internet and it went viral, and there was lots of controversy, and then sites went on ripping the movie apart and attacking Peter. Then Addendum was released, and at the end of that film, it was help create critical mass awareness across the globe. And in order for that to be achieved, I realized that created a lot of necessity, which was there was no place for anyone to go to engage in these ideas. I knew nobody, so that's where the California website came into being, and I started participating in a local chapter. And the chapters, for people who are listening, you can maybe start to see the train of thought here, where things were created out of need to create a space where people could come to actually engage these ideas, but not just engage in the ideas, because learning process is a personal process. So everyone's going to have to learn this stuff on their own through taking the information in for yourself. The need was facilitated by people wanting to contribute, basically step up and volunteer to making a difference, to solving these problems and addressing the issues in society through a root cause approach. And that's one of the things that makes the Zeitgeist Movement unique, is a root cause understanding that we live in a system and that the problems are not anomalies, that the problems are systemic and that they are produced by the system. You can keep locking people up and throwing them in jail, and guess what? Your society is going to keep producing more criminals. Its metaphor would be, if you don't clean out the food from underneath your refrigerator and it goes bad, the ants start coming, and you can stamp on those ants, but they're going to keep on coming as long as the food source is under there. So you need to get to the root causes of things. So that ultimately is what created this network of chapters. I wanted to touch upon for a moment about the chapters with this label that we use as official. Personally, I'd always thought in the back of my mind if this would pose an issue down the road, because for me, the term official has an authoritative connotation or a political connotation, and we're actually couldn't be further from a political institution or a power structure if we tried. So in summary, from listening to everyone's, what got everyone interested in being a coordinator for the movement, the state chapters basically are a network of self-motivated groups of individuals that advocate and support what the movement's talking about with resource-based economy and being in balance with our environment and understanding resources and getting out of this differential advantage consumption model that we're in. And the chapters are really focused on on-the-ground awareness projects and the public interaction. But it's not necessary to be in a chapter. There's a lot of people out there doing a lot of activism on their own without any chapter association or affiliation with the movement. Some people just go out there and advocate this stuff because they see the need for it. And it's not necessary to be inside of what we would term an official chapter network. But the fact is that we use the term official because this is the focus point. This is a focused group. A chapter is a focused group of people that are already in agreement. That's one of the things that get missed, I find, with people who come into the chapters and they think that it's a free-for-all. It's not a free-for-all. By the time you've gotten to this stage, you've seen the films, you've gone on the web, you've gone to the zeitgeistmovement.com, and say you live in a different country or you live out here on the West Coast in the United States, and you click through to your region, you find a local chapter. The chapters exist for people that are already supporting this direction. We're not in need of being torn in 10 different directions on single focus causes, or like just fighting, the destruction of the rainforest, or just fighting, corrupt corporations and single patchwork efforts one at a time. You'll burn yourself out. The chapters are, by their nature, manifesting the agreement a priori when people come in and want to engage in awareness activism on the ground with basically strangers, with the public, with people they don't know, and out there creating a presence. Eva, is there anything you'd like to add in on that?
The chapter structure, as we understand it to exist right now, as you stated, has been something that's been in evolution and will continue to do so. So given our personal experiences as well as our physical location, which some people don't have that background because you are where you are physically on the planet, and that will drive some of the functionality and success, if you want to call it that. And that's even something that has to be broken down. Everything gets broken down in the chapter structure. One of the things I've realized about it, since it's a continually evolving process, is what's important, what's not. in the sense of not so much the focus or the relevancy of what we're doing, but how best to approach it. There are times when there's large events going on, and then it's far easier for there to be interest. Sometimes there's a matter of making events available that individuals may be interested in. If you want to call it the awakening or associating and making available a chapter structure to individuals, is something that allows people to participate at whatever level. And one of the functions I see as a coordinator is to facilitate that. So it's been something that hasn't been written down, this is the way it's going to be. This is actually an evolved process, and it continues to do so. And just on a side note, even Jason and I are talking about status for chapters that are based in actually an institution or already a given framework where they're not working completely independently as most of our chapters are. So there's room for input on that level, but the main focus, as Jason says, has been for information to be made available and to utilize the time and resources that people have available in order to support the movement and its directions and its goals.
So to give this a base to relate to, because the language is great to lay down, and as far as getting some of the distinctions out there of like what a coordinator is, how they're a facilitator really, how they're a volunteer. But to go along with this, I'd like to include in some real world examples so people who may be unfamiliar with what we're doing out there in the world can see what actions are being taken, basically. So I'm going to use a most recent example of something that's happening in the world is the Occupy movement. And as that grows, and there was an opportunity presented itself for chapters to engage in activism. And I'd like to actually move over to Arya of Sacramento, who I think has been doing some tremendous work with the Occupy movement up in his area, and was hoping you could elaborate on how you're approaching it with the chapter and some of the things that you're doing and the benefits that have actually been created.
Yeah, sure. So I started getting involved just on my own. I kind of started getting involved with the Occupy movement, but we did show up actually to their first assembly meeting, a couple of us from the chapter. We wore our shirts, our Zeitgeist shirts and stuff, and we made it clear we're from Zeitgeist, and we just made some suggestions. The major suggestion made by one of our chapter members, Bakari, was that, you should have some sort of educational kind of capacity in the Occupy movement. He suggested teach-ins and workshops, and that stuck. Which was really cool because it provided an opportunity for not only other organizations and other trains of thought to come in and hold workshops, but it also provided an opportunity for us to do so as well, which I think is really important. I don't know if other occupies are doing that, but I definitely think that educational capacity is extremely important. And it's great for us because that's essentially what the chapters are. They really, at this stage, just exist in an educational capacity. That's all we do is educate. We don't write to our congressman or anything like that. But there was some talk, I remember for a while before we got involved with the Occupy movement, people were confused on how we can kind of get involved and stay relevant. And since we're not really a political institution, we don't protest and stuff like that. And I think that is how you can get involved in that educational capacity. Go in there, hold teach-ins, hold workshops, and you don't have to go in there and just say we're the Zeitgeist movement and give everything we're about all at once. It can be a recurring thing. I personally think that people absorb information a lot better in pieces than trying to blast everything at them at once. So I've been wanting to hold a applied technology versus technological capability kind of workshop. So explaining why, okay, this is what we're capable of doing. Why aren't these technologies being applied? And that ties in very nicely with the movement, with a combination of things like technological unemployment, planned obsolescence, and all of those things. So I think you can get, and I'm also personally involved with the Occupy movement, also separate from the chapter. And that actually works out really well too, because I can talk about a lot of these things, and I don't have to necessarily say that I'm the chapter, and I'm not trying to co-opt anything. Just here on an educational capacity, and I think it's really important that we do get involved because what I've found with this Occupy movement is there's a really broad spectrum of people there, people from all over the political and economic spectrum, all kinds of different trains of thoughts, and there's a lot of people that are eager to learn and eager to listen. So, and I think we should be eager to learn and listen as well. We shouldn't get naive enough to think that we know everything. So it's a good place to be. It's a good place to spread the ideas.
Wow, thanks, Aria. That's excellent. For anyone who might want to find out a little bit about what's going on with Aria's efforts with the Sacramento chapter, well, first of all, the easiest thing might be to give the shortest link to information. Well, the California state site, the ZMCA, Zeitgeist Movement California, so it's zmca.org, that's O-R-G. And you can go to a chapter page and click through to any of the chapters and see what they're up to. And Ari's been putting out videos and doing on-the-ground activism up there. We'll circle around and get back to some of the other forms of things that we're doing in a moment. But I wanted to move all the way down the West Coast to a more southern vicinity of San Diego. And Dawn, you've been here since the chapters came into being, and you've been around for a while. And I've also noticed you are also coordinating one of the larger chapters that I'm aware of. Wanted to maybe have you just let people know what it's like to have seen something go from just yourself, basically, or maybe you and a couple other people, to a larger group, and what are some of the outcomes that you're seeing from your efforts?
It's really just a matter of getting out there and establishing lines of communication with other people who have the same like-minded interests. We have an amazing group down here that if it wasn't for all these other people in this chapter, we wouldn't be able to accomplish the feats that we actually have and actually bring, other members in and grow the chapter like we have. Just people that have volunteered their own time, their own skills, and their own resources in whatever way and capacity that they could to get us web presence on, with setting up a group site, website, developing a web presence on at least on a local level, a place where people can go and communicate their thoughts and just engage with other members in conversation. I think that's a very important key piece in establishing a chapter and working on growing one. The next biggest thing, if not more important than establishing a web presence, is just street level activism, getting out there in the trenches, set up a table somewhere. Your best bet is to attach yourself to, a larger event. In the past, we've done Earth Day down here the past couple of years, and you can really engage with the general public at events like that. People from all walks of life go to these things. Also, regarding the Occupy movement that's going on, this whole phenomena, just getting out there. We have a couple members that have been involved down there pretty regularly. One of our members is actually on the education team. I just sent her out an email earlier today about organizing one of those teach-ins like Aria was just describing, and possibly getting our message out down there. But engaging with the public is really first and foremost. After that, you will find that you'll get a group of core members that stick around, and for whatever reason, they're able to involve themselves more with the movement than others. People will come and go. Don't get discouraged by that. But you'll find that your core group will, they'll generally be there for the most part for you. And it's not, I've never experienced a time where I felt I was standing alone. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times I feel like I should put in more time personally than, some of our other members have been. But for whatever reason, people will, life happens, you get busy. And it's good to know that you have other people out there that have your back. And once you do develop that core group, you can go out and really start to grow the movement. I've seen, requests coming in almost on a daily basis for new member requests on our group site. And I don't see that going away, really. I mean, we've kind of achieved that level of recognition, I guess, that's out there.
That's excellent. And I think it's a great overview of what's happening, like how things came into being, the creation of a core group. Some people will have more time than others to contribute. Because again, this is all volunteer effort. Usually people get inspired some way. From what I've seen, people get inspired through the emotional connection with the films. They receive some of the new information, how simple some of this stuff can be. A systems approach, which I had just recently done a lecture on, to resource management is actually a quite simple concept. It's not difficult. You can boil it down as far as the logic of it, to one page. Even though when you scale it out to include the world's resources, it can look very complex. But the principles of what we're advocating are actually quite simple to understand. And being in balance with the environment, I would think that most people in abstraction, if you were to approach them about a point like that, they would be like, well, yeah, of course. If you use up all the water, we'll die. If you pollute all of our food, we'll get sick and stuff like that. So now let's move over to Los Angeles. Just for the audience that's listening, if you're not familiar with the LA chapter, we're in the process of doing some town halls. We've been trying to really engage the public on that level with the public meetings now since June of 2011. Eva and Brandon, who are coordinating that chapter, are doing tremendous work with consistency, having the meetings designed for different purposes. Because of the number of people that have shown interest, we have orientation meetings versus planning events versus the actual event itself. So there's almost like 3 different categories of actions that need to take place when the group hits a certain size. This is for Brandon. For a chapter that's really grown, and as far as I know, it's just want to preface this isn't, we're not trying to compare to anyone else, but to just share the experience of the situation that we're in with other people. And maybe this will inspire you to get involved with a chapter, or maybe you'll be like, you know what, I'm just fine doing stuff on my own. I don't need to be in a chapter to do what I do, and that's equally fine. But what are some of the biggest challenges that have presented themselves while you've been basically facilitating a group of people that are interested in this direction and want to come and make a difference and contribute, basically?
Let's see. One of the biggest challenges would be plugging people into the chapter. For new people that join the chapter, I want to make it as easy as possible. I want the communication to be as clear and pure and digestible for people to come to a meeting, to feel comfortable to come to a meeting or to activism or to an event. So one of the most long-standing things that we're trying to really nail down is to make it easy for people to plug in and become a functioning part of this chapter, because we want it functioning on a large scale where all these people are doing different things, and it's not just on a few people, because it can tax people out, for one, and secondly, it works a lot more efficiently when people are all involved and it's a well-oiled machine. So I really that's one of the major things I try to take on, is really talking to the people, listening to people, trying to understand where they're coming from, and getting them plugged in somewhere. Also, another big challenge is, coordinating a chapter as large as Los Angeles is scheduling consistent activism, meetings, events, having a consistent presence throughout the LA area. It is a huge city, so I'm constantly on Google Maps looking at different areas of the city, convenient places to get off the freeway and meet, or places that are highly populated for activism. We do banner activism, where we take large, oversized banners. We hold them above freeways because there's a lot of traffic in LA. So there's all kinds of things involved in that, like considering traffic time, what time the sun goes down, to what time to meet, and is there free parking? It costs $10 just to meet somewhere in LA. Having something consistently up there on the calendar, so that when people hit our website, people that may be new, or if they've been around for a while and they've got some free time, I want there to be something that they can come and participate in, whether it's whatever it is. And so that's another challenge, which is event coordinating. We've become event coordinators now as this over the last 2 years, and it's been quite a ride. Contacting local fairs or local sustainability events, whether it's at colleges, or there's always something going on, at the beaches, figuring out, especially also for things like Z-Day or for Zeitgeist moving forward, event planning and event coordinating can be a lot. So that's another challenge, and just keeping myself sane and being okay with so many things on my plate. They don't all have to be finished or tied up, but just being okay, and again, plugging people in to assist and to have themselves become a major part in helping this be a functioning chapter.
Thanks for that, Brandon. I think that's an excellent insight into group organization. I would imagine that this transcends what we're doing and is a challenge for just about any group or movement of volunteers that's trying to organize themselves. Okay, moving forward. So we've covered coordination, what the chapters are, some examples of activism that are taking place, which we'll actually get into a couple more here as the hour goes in. And as far as any designation of official versus unofficial when it comes to the chapters, it's really only a way to distinguish what the group's purpose and intent is for, and the relative noise level of the information involved with the activities. That might sound vague. I'd like to actually go into that a little bit. And to see the benefit as far as our activities in the movement in relation to this concept of noise level, because once you get all that noise out of the way, all the battling ideologies and all the causes and all the fighting, it actually opens up a path to understanding the root cause view and see how the problems are systemic. When the noise level drops, productivity goes up, and someone who has a lot of experience with this would be Eva of the Los Angeles chapter. So Eva, let's hear from you on this.
One of the things that gets stated often is there's no aspect of what's going on in the world at large that in some fashion we don't address in the movement. So there's a natural linking to people's ideas and concepts of what they would like to have done. The idea of being relevant to the movement and also being in communication, to me, is foundational, as far as we are not asking anyone to stop doing what they're doing. What we're asking is, if you choose to participate, that we have certain understandings as to how activities are pulled together. Now, this is not a unilateral decision on the part of coordinators, more so than when involving in projects that members decide whether they choose to step up and participate. Since this is all volunteer on everyone's part, if a project can't get launched because there's not interest, the relevancy has to be questioned. If it's something that's on point, people are more than willing to step in with what resources they have. So as coordinators, what we do is we basically share that experience with individuals. It's not to say, no, you can't do it. We've had projects that didn't launch well, that people followed through, and subsequently someone may have picked up the project as far as like tweeting and went ahead and did it, and it actually had a greater level of success. Now, one of the foundational aspects of members stepping up at this capacity and saying, okay, great, I want to do this, they no longer think in terms of just handing it off to a non-entity and say, you, whoever that may be, do it. They realize they take on their own projects and then also get an experience of what that is like. And some will follow through and continue to do, and some say that's enough for now and we'll step back and then we'll participate in other levels. So that is one of the things that I have clearly with the distinction as far as official chapters, and chapters where people may support the direction of the movement but aren't necessarily ready to do any activism. They may be supporters, where we're actually very active in what we do as far as getting information out regarding the movement.
Thanks, Eva. And to just conclude on this topic with some less formal language that I pulled off of Wikipedia about this concept, it's sometimes used informally to refer to the ratio of useful information to false or irrelevant data in a conversation or an exchange. For example, especially with the forums that we used to have on the global site and other online communities, off-topic posts and spam are basically regarded as noise that interferes with the signal of a discussion. And as things started out, before there was any place for people really to come to, the noise level could easily rise up to the point where a lot of meetings or a lot of efforts of people to organize digressed into the tedium of everyone just basically soapboxing. And once the noise threshold, I would imagine, of just about any organization, especially volunteer groups, and I'm sure Occupy is dealing with this as well. Once the noise level hits a certain threshold, productivity takes a nosedive. It just stops. So this was important because for one of the reasons the chapters can be effective and activism can take place, there are people who are facilitating these things happening and bringing the group together for a common purpose or common focus, which is get this information out there, awareness activism, global mass awareness, step number one. And for now, that's our main focus, just about everything that we're doing. And to keep the broad view, the Zeitgeist Movement is not the only organization out there trying to affect change. I mean, there's a multitude of places to go. Different groups, organizations to join, places where you can donate resources and money and things like that. As of yet, I found nothing that addresses the root causes of our social problems, things like the monetary system, our relationship to the environment, such in a way that the information that was presented to me through the Zeitgeist Movement addresses. And so taking these understandings and taking the time to talk to people and facilitate, just speaking personally, I'm gaining the ability to stay focused on the information surrounding the tenets, of what a resource-based economic model would be, what's relevant to the conversations, basically looking around the world and realizing that there's a need has been created for the immune system of our society to basically engage in its own social therapy, if you will, which is going to be necessary in order for any sort of transition from the current systems that we're in, to even take place. So that creates its own need for this conversation that we're having right now, with the other chapter coordinators. We all feel the need to, keep the noise level down as much as possible, keep the signal up as much as possible, because that has a direct impact on our ability to be productive in our activism. Let's open it up to our guests if they have any further experience they'd like to add to the topic.
Yeah, sure. Well, here in Los Angeles, especially with large gatherings, there is a tendency for people to want to take that audience in a different direction as far as other organizations and other actions. But like you said, Jason, our whole focus is awareness, actions, and education and communication as far as getting to the bottom of the causes and the problems in the world as laid out in the Zeitgeist Movement materials. So yeah, there's we want to keep it on track and keep ourselves focused instead of having people retranslate the movement into something else, etc.
Also, regarding signal to noise ratio, this is so fundamental in communication, especially in group settings. I feel very fortunate, and I'm really inspired by some high school students recently that had sat down for the 3.5-hour movie with, I think there was a total of 7 of them, not only watched the movie, but had a discussion and subsequently started a school club. They obtained sponsorship and then had been in communication both with the state and with the local chapter regarding looking for some direction in their functionality. I had a chance to sit in their meetings. They have it once every couple weeks over at El Camino Real High School here in Woodland Hills. And so I joined them for one of their meetings and subsequently the next day talked to them for a couple hours. One of the things that became very apparent, their process, because it's a fixed audience that they have students go in and out, was they understood acutely how important it was to manage the group. That was half, and they understood that by their actions, that was half of what needed to be addressed. They had a subject that they chose for that topic. It was presented not only in print, but also it's apparently an official club. It's announced over the speaker system. They write it up on the board. They open the discussion. They give the definition, and then they open it to the floor. Their process has been a step-by-step of laying groundwork so that the members come to the idea of how functional a resource-based economy is without actually having to start at that point. So they have the luxury of doing that. The normal noise level that we get at conventional meetings are no different in the meetings they have. Being rushed, being put on the spot, being told this is ridiculous, and managing it quite well. So these are skill sets that apparently are available to all of us in the sense of whether we're going to learn it or we're learning it or we have yet to learn it, that are intrinsic and are important to grasp as far as noise to signal ratio and being functional. So this is not an opinion, as a lot of things that are going to be structured become apparent. There are group sizes that are functional. There are layouts of how to run things. This isn't any one person's idea. You can experiment. We've gone through a lot of our experimental phases on how things work. Researching and reading and then applying seems to be the most efficient way of doing this. And I think that the high school chapter is a good example of that.
Just for the people who are listening, recently, this is a recent development too. There are chapters in a lot of the major cities out here on the West Coast of the U.S. We're also starting to see interest spring up from students, and this is new territory for us as as volunteers, especially and as chapters, that how we've organized to be in communication with each other. The students are under a different set of circumstances. As a volunteer, I have a lot of freedom to participate where my skills, can shine or what best fulfills me. And what we're noticing is that, when you create a presence in a group, in an institution, they are subject to the rules of that institution. And so for us, as we develop chapters and groups, I think that'll be something that's going to come into play. So Eva, could you maybe touch upon that, for especially if there's anyone who's out there listening who's in a school or in a college?
Well, by all means, if you have the opportunity to get support from an instructor who's seen the movies or whatever level of sponsorship and understanding, we even have private schools that are not affiliated with a state or city function that are having these same types of conversations, which I think is great. So again, we're learning as we go. The distinction that I have, at least here in California, is this is something that early on, even as a coordinator, I looked at. This is a pretty daunting task to look at. Okay, we're going to just try to get all this information out and available to everyone, and they can make their decision on how they choose to behave. And the state of California, other than broken down to state, is broken down to 58 counties. And then within the counties, there are cities. And within the cities, now I focus mainly on Los Angeles County and the city of LA, but the numbers escape me right now, but the cities are further broke down into communities. This was a natural review and progression for me in so much that I understood just from general conversation with people who had been recently involved with the movement, how they came into the movement. So there's going to be overlap. And we are now experiencing one of those overlaps where we have members that are interested. Their personal desires as far as what they do as the time progresses and their involvement, if they choose to set up independent of what was established perhaps in a locale, is completely up to them. So this is something, again, as Jason says, we're experiencing right now as a real world time and event. So we're very careful, and we try as best, or I try as best I can, to step back and look at what we're doing from the standpoint of the existing institutions and the way things are established, and to make this as an easy transition and growth process for everyone involved. So we tend to be cautious about terminology and statements and how we present ourselves or how members present themselves to their schools, and that's what we're here to facilitate. And other than that, I'm really looking forward to this because, again, it'll be a new experience to see how these new, what I call community chapters, because they are based in a community locale, and it does cover everything from your local gardening club taking an interest into it, or a nursing organization, or a school institution. So here's some of the overlap. We should actually welcome it. As confusing as it can be to members or people who are new or interested in trying to understand, why do you have so much of this? Why don't you just have one portal? Why isn't it all coordinated? And this is kind of a groundwork to understanding why it is this way and how it actually functions.
Right, and Jason, regarding schools too, I mean, a lot of schools have groups and causes going already, so they're ripe for this kind of a thing. A lot of, we've been at USC, we just had a town hall there. A lot of us are really excited at what that may mean and for the progression of, doing lectures there and doing screenings. We've been at UCLA, we've been at Pasadena City College, we've been at LA City College, and there's a lot of groups and causes there, so this is ripe for a chapter to be there. And what we usually do is we contact professors. We're in contact with Barak Koshnevis from Zeitgeist Moving Forward, who's at USC. We've contacted Sapolsky. We've contacted him, trying to get him involved, and what we do is we take professors and people at schools, high schools, colleges. We approach them with a DVD and like a package with a package of like a DVD and material, something that describes the movement, and maybe a flyer, and just put together a package and maybe even put it in an envelope and just presenting it right. So yeah.
Thanks. That's great. Also, this will be good information and maybe spark a few ideas for people out there who are listening that, in support of the Zeitgeist movement and want to advocate this direction and might be in school or know someone at an academic institution, a university, or a college, and so forth. I also want to point people's attention who's listening, especially while we're on this topic, as far as where to find some of this information. James Phillips in the UK, who does some of these radio shows himself, did a wonderful lecture on education at the last Z-Day event in London. He's put up a website, and it's www.tzmeducation.org. And there you can actually see his presentation video and find out some information on how do we learn and activism in schools and so forth. And for anyone who's listening that's also local and they're in a school or a university or college, if you go to zmca.org/regional-chapters, that's regional-chapters, or if you go to zmca.org and just click on the chapters menu, at the bottom there's basically a site we've sort of created to bring academia together, students, professors, teachers, and so forth, to sort of try to address the need of having a place for people to come to together. It's more common versus having a separate site for every single different person in group, which will also be something that we address in another show. And now I wanted to move the conversation forward into something that I'm seeing as a state coordinator with so many chapters around me. And this is actually an observation that that goes out to all the chapters that I've witnessed, especially with those that participate in the U.S. chapter structure and the people that I know through the USA meetings that are coordinated through Jen Wilding, is that all the chapters have their own personality. From what I can tell, is sort of an attribute of their autonomy. The activism that takes place, the types of people that come together, and the skills that show up basically are different everywhere you go. So the chapters all take on their own personality, if you will, through the types of activism that they're engaging in. And this happens with individuals. Some people are better speakers, so they do radio shows, or some people are better technically, so they may assist via, just doing sound or creating a video or something like that and being more technical in their contributions. And some people like to engage one-on-one, face-to-face, and so they may be involved with events and go to some larger event or festival that may already be taking place and basically do that cold introduction, to a complete stranger that's walking by and engage them in a conversation and maybe give them a DVD or something or more information to go with. So the personalities of all the chapters, take on an aspect of their own. This might be some good idea ground for people that are unfamiliar with the chapters, might be interested in getting involved, to hear some real-world examples of how this shows up. So let's start with Aria in Sacramento.
So I'd say our chapter definitely has a lot of kind of media savvy and tech savvy people, and people that are very creative. So we started the TZM Street Talk series a little while back. And it's really started to take off nicely. The concept, actually, we started talking about doing a video series similar to this probably in the beginning of the year, around January. I think it was right around when Moving Forward was coming out before the premiere. And nothing really materialized. We just kind of threw ideas back and forth for a while. And then one of our chapter members, David, eventually finally took the initiative and kind of wrote up a whole plan for this episode series. And after that, it just took off once he got that structured, which brings up a really good point, by the way. Jason, you always say it's your idea, it's your project. And I think that's a really good philosophy to kind of follow. It helps empower people, because otherwise a lot of people come into the chapter and we're so used to the world that we live in today where, you have your manager and your boss at your work and you wait for them to give you instructions, and they think coming into a chapter that I got to wait for the coordinator to give me instructions, when in fact what we want you to do is come in and just come up with an idea. If it's relevant, you start the project and we'll throw whatever resources we have at you. So I think that this was a really good example of that starting. And in this case, the entire chapter really thought it was a good idea and really wanted to get involved, so we all did. I'd say the personality of our chapter currently, as far as activism, is more on the creative end. We definitely we've started talking about structuring something for doing town hall events, because we definitely recognize the importance of that. Hopefully we'll have something down in the next couple months and we can do our first town hall event.
Thanks for that, Aria. I've enjoyed your chapter's video series quite a bit. It's great to see the on-the-street interaction and the montage of the answers and everything to the questions that you're asking, get a sense of what people are thinking. And just for a point of comparison, let's hear from Eva or Brandon of the Los Angeles chapter, just so the listeners can get a feel for how things differ.
That is really interesting in reflection. I realize, because of resources that are available both material building wise and skill and people wise, that things have actually grown and changed quite a bit. One of the coordinators mentioned earlier about, it was Don, regarding the fact that, people will come and people will go. They have their lives and people relocate. So we've had key people stepped up in areas like media or print or artwork and then have moved on for whatever reason. And it's kind of interesting, because I know at one point we miss obviously the individual and their efforts, but also it does open the door for something new to step in. And that is one of the things I see with Los Angeles. The tendency goes towards the events because we do have a larger group that we can coordinate. We tend to support. It's not to say that smaller events aren't of interest or focus. It's perhaps that they can get overshadowed. And we're here equally to support all of them. But again, the more visible ones are the larger events. Brandon had put together the last Z-Day over at the convention center, and that actually started off as a whim. Wouldn't it be nice if? And we actually followed up on the idea. Similarly, with the Zeitgeist Media Festival, this is, to me, another example of a member who has a project, and to the best of our ability, we facilitated in supporting and getting that project done. So yes, I think it is an interesting question, Jason. So because one has to step outside and then look to see where the differences are, where I see it is more along the lines in conversation with the different members, more specifically, obviously, the coordinators, as though some of the issues may be similar, their approaches can be different because of the fact that the demographics that they're working with and the people that are in the group. And additionally, we'll continue to attract those people. I think LA being as diverse as it is, we definitely don't have a shortage of ideas coming through. There may be some issues as typically with expectations of what actually does happen and how things work in the chapter level. Again, I can't stress enough that people will volunteer and pull together around what they find productive and relevant as far as a project. And if it's not discovered to be that way, it's not really a fault situation or someone not wanting to do something. There is a timing issue as well, as far as when people are available regarding vacations or holidays and so on and so forth. So these are all things that normally we don't have to think about, but being a coordinator, you get a great opportunity, and that's the way I look at it, to look at and to evaluate and to work as best as we can.
It's great to see the variety of stuff that takes place. And just for the people listening, oftentimes we focus on the positive. We give the feedback you're getting, or people hear from the chapter structure or from the activism that we're doing or whatever it is that people are doing, are generally the results. Everything we do doesn't always work, basically. And part of being a coordinator is also taking on a piece of the operational approach, which is an aspect of the scientific method, which is, trial and error, and you observe, you look at the results, you take in the feedback, and then you adjust accordingly. And and that's sort of taking on responsibility for what you're doing versus, say, blaming everybody else for your idea not working. You look at the fact, what didn't work about that idea, or maybe that's not interesting people, and so then take it on to change the direction. So I'm just curious what just maybe one thing you've done, and I'll throw this out to all four of you, that you've learned that doesn't work and you've changed something you do in regards to that. So we'll just start with Arya.
So our chapter has definitely gone through a roller coaster of phases. We've had our ups and downs. We've had projects fail. We've had projects just not be very effective. Some never even got off the ground. And I think it's really important for people not to get discouraged by stuff like that. It's going to happen. One of the biggest kind of, paradigm shifts we took as a chapter as a whole was we were trying to do a lot of stuff at once. And as a result, we kind of got nothing done very well. And when we shifted our focus and decided to just kind of focus on one thing at a time, that really made a big difference. So I would suggest most chapters, whether you're small or large, if you're large, you can have a couple projects, it's easier. But if you're a smaller chapter, definitely start off with just kind of one solid project that everybody likes. Get that going and make it routine. Make it work, and then make it routine once you have a format that works. Once it's routine, move on to another project. It's really easy to keep something going that works and has become routine for you guys. That's no problem. And I think that's a really good kind of strategy to make sure that you're an effective chapter. You don't need to do everything all at once. We have plenty of time right now. We got a long way to go still, so there's no rush.
That's excellent. Well put. Don, how about you? What have you observed? Something that you realize doesn't work, and something that you've moved into doing differently.
Yeah. Well, first off, I gotta agree with Arya on that one. Kind of keep things focused. You don't want to dilute your message by having too many projects going at once. That's excellent advice there. The only thing that really sticks out in my mind, at least with my involvement with this chapter throughout, its evolution, is really pay attention to, if you're going to hold an event, make sure it's a proper venue. Like I mentioned in the first incarnation of ZM San Diego, we held this screening at a bar, which is really not conducive for people paying attention to what's going on. We couldn't hold a Q&A afterwards simply because the general overall noise level. It's a public space where they have to remain open for other customers to come in, and patrons come in and drink, of course. So really pay attention to the venue that you select if you're going to hold an event, and make sure it's conducive to being a good learning environment where you can engage the public. I mean, if it's just an entertainment thing, like the media festival was great. If you just want to make it like a general fellowship thing, but if you want to hold any kind of intellectual conversation, that's really the key.
That's a good point. We had some issues out here. This is for the listening audience. When we did our screenings of Zeitgeist moving forward for the premiere screenings, and I know one of the chapters ended up having to turn a lot of people away. I think it was more than 100 people away because their venue, their estimation of the interest was much lower than what turned out, actually. So that's a good point.
Yeah, we had actually that good. It's a good reminder. We had that same issue here in San Diego. Our venue was a lot smaller than the interest. Fortunately, we had a backup where we could take whatever overflow and have a second screening a week later, which is our meeting center. But yeah, it's always better to overestimate.
Thanks, Brandon. How about you with the Los Angeles chapter?
I would say expectations, as trying to mobilize and keep our efforts balanced and effective. Expectations is huge. To not, as doing this, a lot of times, even I or a few other of us will end up doing most of the coordinating and the showing up and the bringing of materials, and to not expect a certain crowd to show up, to not expect anything really. We're not scheduling things and doing awareness actions and events or screenings or anything like that because we hope to achieve something by the time we die, or to achieve some goal. But the very act of doing this and the very act of engaging in this movement is the whole is the end, is the whole goal is met just by doing it. There's no thing to achieve. There's no eventual major critical mass, even though we're definitely going for that. There's no end thing here. It's the very act in the process of engaging in this stuff is the very end. So it's something that Martin Luther King said in one of his speeches, that quote, "It is well," end quote, that the intention is there, the intention to create critical mass and excuse me, bring the world together on positive grounds and on common ground and common values. The intention is there, and that's all. The very act in doing it and starting to do it and intending to do it, the desire to do it, that it is well. That is the whole goal. So not expecting. Sometimes you may show up to activism and no one else will show up, and you can't really be bummed about that. And discouragement comes into play, but just move ahead and try not to expect too much. And the other thing I'd say, pitfall, would be getting sucked into other people's awareness projects. Like Arya said before, it's one of Jason's mottos that has really kept us on track, which is your project, your idea. And a lot of people will see the audience and they'll, say, chop, chop, let's get this movement going. I want to see critical mass by, next 2 years. What are we doing? Let's get this project going. And it's often, hard to just keep people focused on their project and not let them get sucked in using the term we, let's all do this, kind of a thing. Because a lot of us have a lot on our plate already.
Thanks for that, actually. And it's something I've learned early on. If it's your idea, it's your project. And that's because there is no company, there is no Zeitgeist Movement office, there's no Zeitgeist Movement building with a bunch of employees standing by to take your idea and turn it into a project that's done for you. Because of part of the voluntary aspect of how we've organized ourselves, if it's something you really want to see happen, you need to be the change that you want to see in the world, and you have to bring the resources or the skills. You need to bring whatever to the table to support your idea, and also not have expectations about it. If you go in, like Aria and Brand, you guys have pointed out, by taking on a project and wanting to do it, if you're expecting a bunch of people to jump on board with you and they don't, you're setting yourself up for a lot of frustration, versus being that example and bringing the resources to an idea and inspiring others. Other people are going to see that, and they see the merit in what you're doing. It becomes self-evident, and they end up participating. And that's something I'm sure all of you have experienced. So,
Yeah, I was thinking about the idea of failure, and I said, I don't think I've experienced failure when it comes to the movement. What I have had is epic disappointment and great learning curves about my own biases and my own thinking about how things should be, and the flexibility and the understanding that I've been provided through basically educating myself to the materials in the movement allows me the breathing space to realize, oh, okay, Brandon has heard me say coordinating the membership is like herding cats, and to think of it differently, that people are going to follow in step. Perhaps a different leadership type skill, and that may be the case, but the leadership aspect to me is not something that's dictated more so than by our actions people choose to follow. So the disappointments have been, as Brandon has mentioned, has been around actual expectations of certain associations, i.e., you've asked me for resources, that's great. Can you do this for me? No, you can't. And being okay with that. Or basically what has become quite apparent is where the breakdown occurs or starts to occur, and I'm very acutely aware of it, is what we have here is a failure, if anything, to communicate. And sometimes breaking down the nitty-gritty of a project and who's responsible for what seems like such an arduous task, but apparently very necessary. So regardless if it's in our personal lives or it's in the movement or it's amongst chapters or anywhere in our lives, these are skill sets that are well worth learning. So definitely my own biases is one of the things that I've had to come to grips with. And basically on some points being wrong, as Brandon knows, especially on some of our larger projects, I can be very animate about a point of view, and I will not let it rest until we're both clear on how we see things, and then whosever project it is, they get to move forward as they choose to, and we will support it to the best of our ability. Asking questions about how things are going to get done is not automatically a dismissal of a project, nor is any more than saying silence is compliance and agreement. So we're very acutely aware of this, and again, this is part of the learning curve from our disappointments/failures.
Thanks, Eva. Well said. So I'd like to wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for participating. This is, I think, probably the first radio shows that have really had chapter coordinators on to talk about what we're doing, how we're organized, the purpose behind our actions, and so forth, along with our experiences. So Aria, Brandon, Don, and Eva, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this ZM Global Radio. And for the listening audience, in order to find more information about chapters and the movement itself, please go to the zeitgeistmovement.com. The new website was put up recently, and it's really well laid out with press releases and information, the section on education, and the materials that we draw from for the information that we're advocating, and also on how to find a chapter near you, or if there isn't one in your area, to find how to start one. Just scroll down to the bottom of the zeitgeistmovement.com, and all the chapters across the world are listed there, and that is a great place to start. So I'd like to thank you, everyone, for listening. This concludes this episode of ZM Global Radio. My name is Jason Lord. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening. And this is the Easter egg of the show. For those who've been listening to the show in its entirety, I'm going to end with a clip of a live performance of Peter Joseph from the Music Box Theater in Hollywood for the Zeitgeist Media Festival.
Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. Maladjusted. I would like to say to you today that there are some things in our society and some things in our world for which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. Until the good society is realized. Until the good society is realized.